I'm Cherry Ojukwu, and this is still the Eastern Business Report. We've already established that running your business on WhatsApp is not true automation. Today, we are taking the tech off the whiteboard and bringing it straight to the shop floor. Our focus, practical tech for the Southeast. Back to show everyday business owners exactly how to plug revenue leaks and scale aggressively is the founder and CEO of Pine Business Grow, Mr. Chidubem Anowor. You're welcome, sir.
Thank you, and thank you for having me on your show.
All right, so we often focus heavily on, the cost of implementing technology, but we rarely discuss the cost of staying manual. In our current inflationary climate, how much is the lack of automation actually costing the average Southeast trader in terms of lost man hours and invisible inventory leakage?
Okay, a very good angle. This is a lot like a movie I watched yesterday that was speaking about reverse entropy. So the cost of leveraging the manual process of business management is heavy, and up till maybe very recently, when small businesses, or let's say the the MSME is categorizing the micro, small, and medium enterprises. So very recently, the medium enterprises started transitioning to automate their processes, and they now started accounting for what was the cost of foregone alternative, that is what they are now saving from what they were losing before. But for the small businesses, the cost is even more. Now, most of the small businesses that would carry all their inventory in their head. If you walk into any shop, most of the shops anywhere, whether in this Port Harcourt, Enugu, Aba, Abia, wherever, you will notice that most of the people who have all these small businesses, tailors, people who are selling accessories, they all have their inventory in their head. If the person is selling spare parts, he has all the inventory in his head. So the only way he knows what is lost and what is not lost is what he remembers and what he doesn't remember. And then he has his staff who sell things, and they can make decisions on who to give discounts and who not to give discounts. So he's not able to have a structure to be able to account for the revenue he's making and the profit margins. He's not able to identify which of his products are peaking in terms of sales and which ones are not selling as the others should, because he should be able to do these metrics if he had been able to automate his inventory process. He's not able to do that. And what that cost is doing for him is that he's probably buying more goods that he doesn't need initially. And at the end of the day, he has a lot of what he doesn't need stock in his place. He ends up swapping it with his neighbor or his colleague who has more of what he needs. Now, that in itself is a lot of cost, because by the time he does this trade by barter thing they do, he's already losing revenue he could have saved if he had automated this process. These people don't realize this. Now, don't get me started with how the sales girl or sales boy in his office is also hiking prices across the different things he's selling. You understand? So there are so many angles to this, and this is just me mentioning what is the most prevalent for small businesses. And so the cost is heavy. They don't see it initially because they've already factored in that for the first 1 year, they should lose at least 50% of what they've invested. This is how the typical Igbo man would plan his business, knowing that some part of it will be lost to different kinds of stuff. I'm hoping that in this conversation, we will try to show the value of transitioning and how the very large margin between what they are losing in terms of using the manual process and what they are gaining once they are able to start automating the processes, however little would be. Thank you.
Oh, very well. So the biggest barrier to tech adoption in our cluster markets isn't a lack of interest. I understand it to be a complexity of tools. So how have you designed Pine Business Grow to fit the one-handed operational style of a busy trader who simply doesn't have, time or patience for a steep learning curve?
So how we did this is we took into consideration, as I've said, how the typical African businessman does his current business. He has a flow. He has a psychology with which he expects the funds to come. He sells, he buys, he keeps. The customers walk in. He's trying to do all of that at the same time. He has his inventory in his head, right? So one of the first things we do is to automate the process using AI integrations that help to automate his inventory. Now, I know that initially it will be a big deal for him because he thinks that to do that would be a waste of his time. But what that does, or what we have tried to do for them in Prime Business Grow, is to do what would take typically maybe a week to do in about 48 hours. We have an AI integrated framework and infrastructure that helps us to automate the entirety of anybody's shop, no matter how big, in 48 hours. Now, that is one of the laps that he doesn't want, because he doesn't want something to clog the business time when people are working and living. I'm talking about I'm talking about the most typical businesses. There are variants, obviously, but I'm talking about the most typical small businesses. So once you're able to do that, the next step would be to guide him on how he can now show him how he can now have access and control over his business. He didn't know some of the things he would know now. He didn't even know what his total cost is, apart from the one he worked in his head. He didn't know that he can now be able to relate to his customers from a different perspective and then angle businesses, not just for the customers who are working, but maybe even look at virtual customers that he didn't consider, right? So, like I said, inventorizing and automating the inventory, but making sure that it's not something that takes his actual time, his trading time with people. So those are one of the considerations we do, to bring an AI complemented infrastructure that gets a part of the automation, a critical fundamental part of the automation done in a very limited time, to be able to start showing results from the beginning. That is how he starts listening to all the other things you want to say.
Oh, very well. So you've talked about transitioning. Now, how does this transitioning process, how does transitioning to your interconnected digital ecosystem provide the verified blueprints necessary for these businesses to finally assess the commercial credit and scaling capital they've historically been denied?
Okay. So very recently, I was listening to, it wasn't a podcast, it was a content that was made on Instagram about how the Igbo nation, and I speak of the Igbo nation, not just this region, and I speak about generally African businesses, how African businesses have been locked out of critical credit and scalable finance infrastructure that are now currently available for people who have data and structure. Now, people are leveraging on all kinds of markets. They're leveraging on digital markets. They're leveraging on crypto markets. They're leveraging on all kinds of markets that require now a lot of data for them to be able to process and give you access to that kind of financing. And most of our predominant African markets are losing out because of the lack of data and structure. And what automation does is to provide that. It lets you know exactly what you're earning, how you're earning. It gives you insights and metrics across all the indices that you want to know. The figures around sales, the figures around inventory, the ins and the outs, when goods arrived, when goods went, your procurement process, your procurement expense, the relationship between your procurement and your procurement, your expense, and your revenue. And these are simple metrics that are gathered at the point of sale and receive and order and inventorize. Now, once you have a matrix that can gather this becomes a framework that provides data and structure that now helps small businesses to make themselves visible to markets like this that can provide financial structure. So these are part of what we are hoping, Pine Zero is hoping to do for the African market, to prepare them with a platform that helps them to give them structure and data that is organized, that is readable, that is usable, that is transmissible to these bigger financial ecosystems that require this data to be able to make or de-risk their relationships or their decisions to how they can impact in these businesses. So this is why most of the MSMEs and small businesses are not able to access the different kinds of credit they should have, because our current traditional flow is good, but it doesn't have the data and structure it requires. And that's where Buying Business Group comes to close that gap, to provide that and give them access to those funds. Yes.
So your platform directly connects merchants to a logistics ecosystem. So how exactly does this solve the last mile delivery friction that typically eats up, the profit margins of our local retailers?
Now, if a local retailer, and I keep speaking of small businesses, think of a business that its starting capital is about 800 or 900,000 or a million. And all he's hoping for the first 6 months is the number of friends and relatives that visit first. And then if he's located in a cluster market, for instance, he's now hoping that anybody he speaks to as he walks in would come in. Now he builds a customer base that chooses buying from him as preference. It could be pricing. His penetration strategy could be pricing. His penetration strategy could be customer success and customer experience management. His penetration strategy could be location preference, the fact that he's located either at the beginning or at the end or very close to entrances. And he doesn't realize that some of these people who walk in and the other bigger markets that may not be able to come to the market should require logistics to do this. Now, maybe there's a logistic provision that is around them, but they take advantage of them. So the pricing they give them and the cost of taking it to them would cost him so many things. He will have to first of all leave his shop to go and discuss with a logistic provider, maybe the local logistics, to do immediate logistics, to discuss with a wider logistic provider that can do long range delivery to the last mile, for instance, for what he's selling. Maybe he's selling long grain rice or whatever. He's not able to articulate that because he thinks he needs to get to a certain point to be able to make that decision to go and discuss. These logistic providers do not make themselves available to them. It is you find me, not me find you. That's the model. But what we are doing is that we have already factored and integrated a logistics ecosystem on our platform. Diverse logistic ecosystem cutting across door-to-doors, haulage, interstate logistics, and the whole 9 yards. And when we bring this logistics ecosystem, we tell them, we make them available to every single person. On the platform, you're able to see all kinds. You can even see the logistic providers that are able to lift things from one marketplace to the other. Now, this completely changes the experience and the opportunity for delivery to the last mile, because the impediments and the restriction or the challenge that they would have had with having to go and engage these people that would take them months before they make that decision would have already been completely de-risked by the fact that they now have a platform where they do not have to stress or strain about it. They now even see that there is an opportunity there is a last mile. How many people know what delivery to the last mile means? How many people understand their impact to the delivery to the last person, especially if particular produce or product you're selling is something critical to such people. Pharmacies, for instance, who should be able to deliver pharmacies who maybe specialize in cold chain. Not all the pharmacies sell cold chain. And pharmacies who sell cold chain need to be able to deliver this cold chain to the last mile. And they are the nearest to a town that is maybe 20 kilometers away. If they have, knowing that they have a platform like this where the people from there can have these things order, get these things delivered because, there's a platform that is running this, completely changes both the experience level, the success story, how success is recorded in terms of delivery to the last mile, and then, of course, the revenue success that comes for the merchant. These are part of the gains of Fine Business Growth and our integration of the logistics ecosystem on our platform.
Oh, very well. So I have two questions, but let's take this one first. So your ecosystem also targets hospitality brands and service providers. For hotels, lounges, and restaurants, the product is the experience. So how does your system allow a local hospitality business in Enugu to seamlessly digitalize room bookings, table reservations, and customer data in a way that matches the convenience of global booking apps?
Okay. So, saying this on live TV will probably be giving off a lot of what we are doing. But I would say that what we are doing is we have understood what the global booking apps are doing, but we've also accounted for the gaps. They are not accounting for specific needs and specific realities of African businesses, particularly African businesses in the hospitality in this ecosystem. We've accounted for that. Now, what the global apps are doing are to provide customers with the ability for them to be able to log in and check and price and do all of that. But there are gaps. There is a gap between there is a real-time gap. Sometimes when you book on these apps, the booking prices and the booking costs and even the images around these things are not reflecting what is today. They are not reflecting what the true picture of the hotel is. If you use bookings.com, for instance, okay, I shouldn't be calling names. So if you use some of these apps, you will see that there are realistic gaps. Now, yes, globally, you're able to see all these things, but in reality, you're not able to actually get what you need. We've closed those gaps. First of all, we provide everything in real time, and this real time is consistent. We do not just provide real-time information to both the customer or the merchant. We also do consistent updates on these things, and these are all AI-driven updates. The merchants do almost nothing in this regard. We provided a structure that allows the merchant to provide fundamental information over a certain period that helps us to provide real-time updates on the platform and give them access to be able to control these reservations through and through. So the point I'm trying to make is some of the realistic gaps you are facing currently, we've been able to close them because we've been able to look at them from the eye of an African hospitality business owner, instead of looking at it from a global tech business platform that is building for Germany, Croatia, and all of that. We're looking at it from the core African things. So if an African is trying to book a thing, all the things that he's very concerned about have been accounted for and is able to access them the minute he punches the click. That's it.
Thank you for going in as much details as you could. So to wrap this up, let's take a look at the broader regional impact. If we successfully automate the majority of our cluster markets, pharmacies and hospitality sectors over the next 5 years, what does that practically do to the Southeast's competitive position within the African continental free trade area?
Okay. Wow. Now, this has been a big concern across the conversations, the free trade area conversation. If you have read some of the things they've been putting out, these every time there are convergences around this, it's always about what happens over the next 5-10 years. They are looking at projections and realistic outcomes. Now, what will happen if these particular SME niches are able to experience not just a transition but the transcendence, is that one, there will be off-takers. There will be massive off-takers from this thing, beyond even being able to impact to providing or giving satisfaction, customer satisfaction to the beneficiaries of these hospitality businesses. We are looking at the off-takes, the people who will benefit, the different new businesses that will be created because a system or ecosystems, related ecosystems that were initially a bit scattered and not very what's that word? Grounded around the impact of automation, particularly unique automation like the one that Pine Business Group brings. They will now see the off-takes that come with it. These off-takes, fortunately and unfortunately, and I'm saying fortunately and unfortunately because the conversation around the African free trade is not looking only at revenue for the merchants, it's looking at the impact at scale. So the off-take I'm speaking of is one of the considerations they're looking at. Who does it rub off on beyond the beneficiary? And yes, that's exactly what will happen. You will have massive off-takes, you have massive opportunities for jobs, you have massive opportunity for micro businesses that will come from these things that are also digitized because you've created a proper ecosystem where a proper digitized ecosystem that is connected, interoperable, and providing let me use the word we use every time you go for a pitch, scalable impact across not just the businesses that are connected, but all the off-takes that are attached to them. Whether it be businesses, whether it be human capital that are now absorbed. And you can imagine how this affects. It starts at a micro level, but if you're assessing it on a macro level, you see the impact is massive. And that is the goal. That will change even the engagement of Africa across between the continent to continent trade. Continent to continent relationships, partnerships will also alter because we now have a game changer because we've been able to utilize this thing without necessarily changing the way we do it, but just automating it and driving it at scale. Yeah, so I guess that yes, at the international level, we will grow to be able to speak level shoulder to shoulder with some of the other continents. But even at home back here, the off-take impact will be crazy.
Thank you very much for that, sir. And that's the much that we can take on the Eastern Business Report. The Afia Business Morning returns tomorrow. Many thanks for staying with us. My name is Cherry Ojukwu. Enjoy the rest of your day. Coming up next is Onye Afia. Bye for now.